All right, next, here is a topic that is very near and dear to my and Sherry's hearts, considering we just put on this conference, is that it could be stressful, right? To organize, to get people back in the room, making sure breakfast and lunch is served properly. And next, our partners over at Attendee Interactive by Community Brands, Jason Daiger, Vice President of Events and Products, is going to share strategies to improve on those details, like planning for the speaker needs, budgeting, and making sure we have stands, donuts in the back. So welcome, Jason.
Morning. Session management, speaker management, call for speakers, call for topics, logistics. These are all the things that are stress generating and challenging sometimes depending on the size of your events. So my name is Jason Daiger. I am the VP of a product for the event space in Community Brands. And a little bit of background, I like to say that I was born and raised in this industry. My first professional day was with Galaxy Registration at the back of the DC Convention Center, the old one, which has been knocked down for many, many years. So today I'm going to kind of talk about some of these big challenges. A lot of these are pretty straightforward, pretty common for all of us, right? Small staff, tight on time, lots and lots of communication that we have to do. Tons of information that we're trying to organize. Could be on the medical space, maybe you're dealing with disclosures, you're dealing with conflict of interest, you've got presentations, you've got video release forms, just a myriad of information that we need to collect and manage just in order to have somebody come up and present this educational content. And if you're in the continuing education issuance space, there's usually a board or a governing body that you need to think about. So to reduce your stress, it's really about how do I collect that information, centralize and make it easier, not only to do my planning, but in the post aspect when an accreditation comes up and I've got to come back and provide the data and provide proof of what we've done. So this is a real long event planner journey, right? We're really going to focus in on these items today. So in order to help do that, I'm going to talk about the Organization for Human Brain Mapping, OHBM. They are an international-based organization. They're actually based here in the States with a management firm. But they work with multidisciplinary groups and a lot of residents in and around all areas of the world. And one of their big goals is to be able to continue to develop and engage and grow their membership, but they're also trying to address it in a lot of emerging markets as well. So we got together with them, and I've been fortunate enough to be on site at their committee planning meeting and work with their leadership group. And one of the things that we found is that when the group started to really communicate clear goals and objectives, and be able to invite and engage the stakeholders, and those are going to be a variety of people in a lot of different ways. Earlier, right, that the end result was a less stressful situation for the meeting planners, for the educational coordinator, and ultimately a better event. So one of the biggest things here is a single source of truth, right? Like having a single spot where you can go to for all of the information about your educational program. And that includes things that are tied to it, like donuts in the back, right, for breaks. It includes things like your AV projection. So I'm going to spend probably the largest amount of time on this develop, right? Because a plan without, a goal without a plan is just a wish, really is what it boils down to. So in this development phase is really where all of the work is done. And if you do this correctly, it makes the rest a lot easier. It's just being prepared. So big ticket items, centralizing the data collection. So trying to not work in multiple systems, being able to have a classification system. So for those that are doing reviews, making sure that your reviewers are be able to assign them based off of that same classification system so that you can match them up later on, right? Embracing collaboration. So one of the things that OHBM had challenge with is they work in a lot of areas where it is there's low bandwidth, low access, very small access to the internet at times, or it has to be gated through, and a lot of their members in certain parts of Asia, they literally don't have email addresses of their own, right? And so we had to overcome and kind of work on this. So we had to figure out ways to make sure that they could collaborate together in an easy fashion. So when we get into the reviewer side of the fence, kind of talk about, mention the areas of expertise, right? And so here's just kind of a quick look at what a submission might look like. Really big key here on the first opening page, you'll notice there's actually 6 different types. When we started with OHBM, we had one, abstract submission. That's all they did. And then as we started to kind of coach and guide and kind of share our best practices, we've expanded that. So they're collecting their half-day workshops, their pre-conference workshops, their plenaries, their symposia ideas. They're putting all of that into a single system so that they're working in a single spot. Now, part of this process of developing kind of the content, right? Thinking about their goals. Their goal was to continue to grow their speaker pool and their membership base. One of the best ways to do that is feedback. So the submission process was really key to create a feedback loop. Now, this is met with varying degrees depending on your organization. Some reviewers are very critical and harsh, and you may want to be kind of temper that feedback. So they just organized a way to actually said, hey, this is feedback specific to the submitter, and they separated that from feedback that is going to be used internally as they're kind of reviewing it. So it really created and encouraged the reviewers to be able to provide valuable, actionable information to increase the pool at the end of the day of their speakers. Now, like a lot of organizations, they use cut lines. Their cut line is very low. As I mentioned, their goal is to increase and grow the membership. So they have a lot lower barrier of entry than some other clients that we've worked with over the years. But it was important for them to still have a metric that they communicated, so everybody knew when they submitted what the grading process was, and everybody's on the same playing field. And the last big thing is bias. They wanted, they were really early on in DEI and inclusive of geographic and institutional diversity. They wanted to remove a lot of that, focus on the science, and then work that back in as things started to evolve and they started to actually get to the planning phase. So just a quick little sample of what a call for a reviewer form would look like so that you can actually identify, these are the things that are going to be expected of me as a reviewer. And this was an entry point that over the course of the better part of a decade, reviewers turned into speakers, turned into people that showed up on their committee. So having a very good experience as a reviewer, while it might not seem important, it is the pipeline that they use to have more speakers to make the planning process of managing speakers and growing the event less stressful. So now we're going to build things. We're going to build and update the event. And so one of the things is coming back to this idea of collaboration, cooperation, right? There's some really key items that are going to happen in here. Scheduling in blocks. Some of our organizations that we work with, including OHBM, they have it's a 3.5-day event. They've got 5 concurrents that they're breaking out. They've got plenary sessions. They've got oral presentations, which are effectively 16 of these, which are the top 6 abstracts that are orally presented in a group. So they've got a lot of people that are involved that are presenting multiple times. So scheduling in blocks, identifying your speaker conflicts up front, key. Backup plan. This is the other thing that they do that not all organizations organize. They schedule 2 different people as backups. So they'll have a standard moderator, a backup for that moderator, and then they'll actually use one of their committee planners to be the third. And having that all set in the system, so when life happens and that person can't get it, they immediately have somebody to fill. So their stress levels significantly reduce because everybody knows and has been communicated with what the expectations are. So picking the right tools is key, right? Trying to do something like that level of communication and that level of planning out of a shared Excel file or out of some other SharePoint site can be really challenging. So this is just kind of a visual of where they've taken some of the abstracts, they're actually creating the events out of them, right? And Let me go back to that. The best way I like to describe this, it's kind of like a blueprint, right? Because your submission is the blueprint for your home. Then you're going to hand it over to someone who's going to go build it. And it's going to change. When that builder gets in there and starts moving, it's going to change. But having the ability to go back and reflect what was the original idea, who were the original participants, makes it easier for when you need to find replacements. You just look in the system, and you could find the list of co-authors or a list of senior authors that might be associated or other individuals. So it further makes it easier for you as you're managing lots of content. So now we're going to jump forward into the management phase of this. Right? And so this is a lot of the stuff that we did. What are our deadlines? We had to have the submission submitted to the team, a couple weeks ago. What additional bio information or release forms, like the video release form that we signed here? Getting that information in front of your speaker set as quickly and easily as possible without having to always go through email, right? Presenting a single spot where they could go. Maybe there are multiple roles. Maybe they're a moderator. They're on 2 panel sessions, and they're also part of a speaker presentation area, right? So each one of those could have different responsibilities. And using a system that lets you communicate as a moderator, here are your expectations. As a panelist, here are your expectations. And not having one single long email as an example that's got everything listed, and I might just be a speaker and it gets lost in there. This is more of an administrative view, right? So your staff, as they're managing this, making sure that they're easily able to see the session, the presentations, the times, quickly add speakers, alternatives, get a status of where things are, right? So when they get a phone call or an email, hey, where do we stand on this session at 2 o'clock on Saturday? They can quickly access that. Another example of these are different types of forms. I've mentioned the audio release form that we've done. You can upload your materials. And for any of you that are actually collecting and work where you're going to be issuing or reporting to, say, ACCME at the end, right? Being able to view the slides in advance and have that at your fingertips is really key to reducing the stress after the conference and having all that data kind of collected. We know life happens and speakers like to make changes, but having a baseline really allows you to set the bar so you understand where things are. Not to mention, all that data is in one spot. So if you are working with ACCME and you do get audited, you come back to a single source of truth. You can look all that information up and deal with your financial disclosure. You can actually collect and manage your resolution of a conflict in a single system, which becomes really key in the long-term management of the content that you provide. So we're going to get into launching and promoting, right? And this is really thinking about how do I get that information out to the general public as quickly as possible, and where are ways that we can reduce the lift, right? How do I get content about a session to our internal marketing team? Who we're going to highlight a particular person? Do I have that speaker bio? Like having that quickly accessible to that team without having to go hunt for that, giving them access to that is really key to reducing the meeting planner's job of managing this content. Coming back to communicating early and often, right? Making sure you've got mechanisms to be able to publish this data to your website, to your mobile app, or to some other device or system that you're going to use to deliver that content is really key. Simple example of a public listing, right? This is from their event this past year with a list of, by day, right? And then we can kind of come in and you can see additional information about the actual session and the details, right? One of the big items that a lot of our groups think about is controlling how much data you release, right? A lot of groups will have, they will actually have embargoes on a lot of the content. So thinking about, you collect a lot of this data, how do I make sure I release it appropriately over the course of time? So now we're getting into what we're doing right now, right? Executing it, right? We're delivering the content, planning for last minute changes, flight delays, hurricanes, et cetera, are gonna change and impact that. So having a single source of truth allows you to change it and communicate out quickly as possible. The other big thing is in the evaluation side of the fence, right? So if we think about what we're trying to do, when I talked about trying to improve the reviewers, it's the same thing for the speakers. Like, how do we improve the speakers? How do we get them feedback as quickly as possible and accurately as possible? Well, it's utilizing an evaluation as near time as possible. right? So think about how, because I've got all this information about the speakers and their schedule, how can I tie that with an evaluation to reduce the level of stress that you have so that when you're in a session and it's over, you can do a session evaluation and look at individual speakers and have them comment and take that data to feed into next year, to feed into, a speaker bureau type system for yourself so you know that you can kind of go and look for people. Can I get a session evaluation a conference evaluation that's in there as well, right? Coming back to how quickly can I capture that data on the execution phase. And when you use that data, right, now we're going to get into the analysis side of the fence. This will be kind of short for me today because one of the big keys, right, is working with your teams, running that data through a variety of systems or analytic tools that you might have out there. So I just talked about kind of the session surveys and speaker evaluations. Tying that into your credit issuance is always, always, always going to increase the response rate, right? So the more data that you can collect by tying it to an evaluation process, right, in the credit issuance process, the better off you'll be. And then you're going to sit back and you're going to review that, right? So just reviewing the different statistics. There are certain tools that are out there that are going to improve that overall analytics side of the fence. There's a lot of options there. And finally, we're going to kind of wrap things up, right? So early on, I talked about goal setting. So one of the goals originally for OHBM was to think about where, as they tried to improve their educational process, right, and growing that base, they want to evaluate how did they do. They want to think about what did they learn. So having the ability to go back and use a system that is reviewing that information easily allows you to create an action plan for the future, right? And once you have that action plan coming down, to the idea that if you don't have a plan, it's really just a wish, right? So by setting that, being intentional about your processes and how you're going to manage your speakers and how you're going to engage them over time is key. So kind of bring this slide back up. I started with this a little bit back in the very beginning. And the reason I like this is because this wheel is continuous, right? You're going to start to gather your content. You collect it, you review it, you approve it. And then from there, you start to build things. You think about how do I schedule it? How do I build it, delegate? It's going to flow into organizing and planning and communicating that information out really succinctly. And then finally, I track or I might award credit, and then I kind of review. And so by doing these things and then repeating it year over year, you'll see improvements. So I'm going to come back to OHBM. So when I first started, they were about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 submissions. And they were a relatively small group. They are now almost annually over about 2,500 to 3,000 submissions that they collect annually. They've increased their number of reviewers year over year, and they've increased the pool of people that they want to have speak. And by doing that, they've made it easier and easier for themselves to find alternates. Coming back to the geographic diversity, they will actually, in their committee meeting with one of the topics, they will say, that's a great topic, but we're overrepresented from this US-based set of institutions. Is there somebody else that can present on that topic? So by having all of that information available and being able to go search for additional people and get recommendations and add them immediately, they've reduced their stress. And literally, it's one person. They have not changed the number of staff that they've had manage this process from when I started with them over a decade ago. So hopefully that gave you some ideas and thoughts about how you can improve how you're managing your content. If you'd like to learn more, I'll be out in the hall at the break. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them now or later. So thank you. Sure.